of the most frightening things that are happening is if an author puts out a book, especially a nonfiction book, within a short amount of time, you're going to have a bunch of AI generated imitators of that book. What happened is that Anthropic got a hold of a pirated library of books. They didn't even buy the books. They went straight to the pirates because they couldn't legitimately get the e-copies that they needed. Content providers should be paid on a token basis, like Spotify artists. So every time somebody pulls up your information or uses it, you should get, micropayments.
Welcome to Artificial Insights, where we have conversations with leaders and thinkers in AI about how AI is changing economics, work, and us. I'm your host, Daniel Maneri, and this is Season 5. Today, I'm joined by Julie Trelstad. Julie has worked in the publishing industry for over 30 years, spanning traditional publishing, digital rights, and indie publishing. She's head of U.S. publishing at Amlet.ai, where she works on rights and licensing infrastructure for the AI era. And she also runs Paperbacks and Pixels, helping authors build sustainable publishing and marketing systems. What got me interested in talking to Julie was when she wrote, "The infrastructure enables the experiment." AI needs high-quality data to train on and high-quality material to reference when it answers a question. As both the law and the internet move towards restricted access, we need infrastructures to discover and license good content. Amlet.ai is working on that infrastructure, and Julie's seen how content publishing and access have changed through 6 different publishing evolutions. 7 if you count AI. I changed my views on how AI accesses content after talking to Julie, and you might too. So let's get to it. Julie, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Julie Trelstad, and I have been working in book publishing for over 30 years. And I have been surfing always the technology wave. So when I joined publishing as a Gen Xer, I was like one of the first people who had actual computer experience in college coming in. So I was the tech person. So we started out with like when my first 6 months on the job of working for a magazine, actually, we got desktop publishing. Within 2 years, we were making CD-ROMs and then eBooks. And then later, as my career progressed, we had print on demand happened. And then we had authors having to do social media. And then now we've got, self-publishing has risen because of the digital thing. And now we have AI. And I've always been really lucky to be the person who gets to work on the frontier.
And which one of those was the biggest shift?
I'd actually like to say that the ebooks were a big shift, not because of the technology, actually, but because of what was also happening in the publishing industry at the time. And it may have been related. But at that time, all the large publishers were consolidating. So in the US, we had over 50 large, medium-sized, profitable publishers. And today we
Wow.
have 5. And that all really started in the 90s. But at the same time, the rise of ebooks and print on demand completely empowered individual authors. So the whole ecosystem of how publishing works, I think really started to shift in the 90s as a result of these changes in technology, but also the mergers and acquisitions, which was a business thing that was going on.
And there's a question I'd like to ask on a podcast like this because I think it's on everyone's minds. But Julie, are you an AI?
Am I an AI? Well, sometimes I wonder. I'm definitely a biological version of it. I can vouch for that.
And I find it fascinating personally because I think I was reading back when ebooks were becoming a thing, but I wasn't aware of that. How is that different? How is that maybe more of a shift than what we're seeing with AI now?
Well, I think it was the beginning of the shift, right? Because what it did is it allowed, I think what it's done technologically is allowed creators to directly get their books into hands of readers very fast. And then, of course, you have blogging and the internet and all those other things that happen to it. It used to be that publishing was very strictly gate kept. And I would say that's from the 20th century. Earlier on, you had people printing their own like things and selling them. But in the 20th century, it was highly gate kept. And what we got as readers and public were things that went through this like system of editors and printers and the book distribution system. And I think that's been completely changed. as a result, and that changes the way people who are creators and authors can
Mm.
face the industry.
And does AI build on top of that? Does it change things beside it? How does that interact?
Yeah, I think the jury is still out. And what's happening right now is it allows piracy to happen faster and better. And I think that's been happening since we've had ebooks, right? There was digital rights management where they sort of put like a hex lock on downloadable books, but of course it didn't work at all because just about every book is pirated. And now, like some of the most frightening things that are happening is if an author puts out a book, especially a nonfiction book, within a short amount of time, you're going to have a bunch of AI generated imitators of that book. Some seem kind of legit until you look really close, but it's flooding the market even faster than like when ebooks came on, the market was really flooded because all of a sudden everything that was out of print came back into print. It was sort of like all the old stuff came back. And now what we have is not only that, but like all this new stuff is coming even faster. And I can know that like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all the online retailers are definitely trying to squash this, but that's
Mm.
what's happening
So
right now.
I think I've heard of publishers starting to have to refuse books because of these AI copies and potentially not as much care in the
For
writing.
sure.
But what's the practical impact of that? Is it like every couple of books that get copied? Is it big?
I think it's bestsellers that get copied because I mean people are running these algorithms on Amazon. There's a bunch of programs
Mm.
and and companies that will tell you, "I'll give you the top sellers on Amazon and then you can copy them and make lots of money because they're top
Mm.
sellers." So I think that's what's being, I don't think the ordinary run-of-the-mill books are being copied. And even like with piracy, like I remember in the day, it was really, piracy only really hurt
Mm.
the Stephen Kings and the big talent. It didn't really hurt the small operators because there was actually proof in the early 2000s that if your book got pirated, you were going to sell more copies because the book was popular enough, and some people, wouldn't buy the pirated. They'd find out about it and then they'd go buy the
Mm.
legit
It's just
copy.
another form of distribution.
Yes, it doesn't exactly. I know college students are like, "Oh, I can get you that book."
Yeah. Like textbooks are probably in the category of highly pirated.
Extremely, yeah, because
Yes.
they're expensive, right? So that's lucrative
Yeah.
to pirate it.
I think this would be a good time to shift the conversation towards I guess, the technology that you're involved with now, like this new
Oh
future
yeah,
that
Amlet.
the
Yeah,
next wave of technology that you're getting to ride. So could you tell us about what you're doing?
for sure. I'm so excited to be like, yeah. So one thing, I have been involved with a couple of Europeans in their business. I worked for Streetlib, which is an international ebook distribution company where anybody can upload their books and it can be distributed to e-retailers all over the world, which is super cool. What the founders realized is that ebooks, there is no way to sell the AI rights to ebooks. Like this was happening over the last couple of years. And in Europe, particularly, there were laws mandating that AI companies needed to compensate authors and content creators, but there was no easy way to prove that the electronically that a piece of content or a book belonged to a creator. So you have things like copyright, you have laws, you have like ISBN numbers, which identify different books and trade all the legal mechanisms, but there was no piece of software or electronic mechanism. So what happened is that Giacomo D'Angelo teamed up with Titus Pan. Giacomo is the CEO of Streetlib. Titus had come up with something he called the ISCC, which is an ISO standard code for any kind of content that can be fingerprinted electronically. So think of it this way, you can take your book and maybe it's a novel about whales. I don't know. But it can come and it can designate 132 points of reference within that novel or more and identify that book without having to like share the contents of that book so that the fingerprint is created. And if another person comes along and tries to copy that book, you can match and say, nope, nope, that was my original content and this is the copy. So Amlet was created as a way to register those ISCC codes. And specifically because we're working in the book publishing industry, what it allows is a piece of tech that allows an author or a publisher to create these codes and then to identify, timestamp them, notarize them, designate which rights are available. So whether or not AI can use it for training, if it can be used in generative AI, if it can be used for research purposes. So there's like different shades of AI use. So it solves the problem of a machine being able to read it. And Amlet even has an API. So anyone who is a developer can plug into Amlet and determine which pieces of content can be used and at what price and who to license it from.
And you use a
So
term at the beginning there of AI rights. What does that mean here?
AI rights, yes. Sure. I think, maybe talk again generally, what are rights sales in book publishing? And maybe it's something that a lot of people don't know that in the United States publishing industry, certainly in the large publishing areas, the rights market, that is selling French language rights, German language rights, Spanish language rights, world Asian rights, audiobook rights, film rights, television rights, play rights, braille rights, are actually worth more than the
Huh.
actual publishing of the book. And they're certainly more profitable because to sell a right, you just like here, other publisher in other side of the world, you can republish this work, just pay us some cash. Like there's no expense. It's very lucrative. So when we talk about AI rights, we're talking about this frontier where this is yet another right that can be sold to this intellectual
Hmm.
property.
And I think there are some variations within how usage might happen with AI. What does that look like
Exactly.
and what are the
Yeah.
concerns?
Yeah, I think a lot of times we think about training rights, which is where ChatGPT, Gemini just ingested like every published piece of work or unpublished piece of work it could get and just turned it into a mathematical formula. So it's basically like you're eating something, you're digesting it. It's no longer the same thing. It's like a mathematical probability. That's training rights. And generally, it happens once for every model that is built. So every time you build a new AI model, large language model, and now we're talking more about small language models again too, it needs to train on data. And the better quality the data, the better quality the model is going to be. So that's usually a one-time right. So generally, like the lawsuits that are going through right now, like the big Anthropic lawsuit, paid over $1 billion to authors because it swallowed their books whole and they can never get it back. So it's like asking forgiveness rather than permission. But now that it's been done once, I don't think, the founder of Amlet calls it, we're now in the post scraping age. You're supposed to get permission now. And honestly, that was really expensive. Of course, they have deep pockets, but I don't think these companies are going to want to continue to pay billions of dollars every time they
And
train a new model. You're laughing.
what was that lawsuit in particular?
Yeah, so the Authors Guild and a group of authors got together and sued Anthropic for taking their rights, for actually ingesting these books. And what happened is that Anthropic got a hold of a pirated library of books. They didn't even buy the books. They went straight to the pirates because they couldn't legitimately get the copies that they needed. In some cases, I understand they actually went to use bookstores and scanned in books to get the books. And they just, there was no law. They couldn't easily, like, if they went to a publisher and said, hey, I need AI rights, publishers were like, what's that? 2 years ago, no one was even talking about this. It didn't even occur to them that this was a thing. And it certainly wasn't in our publishing
Mm.
contracts that developers could get paid to suck in nonfiction books and novels. So that lawsuit was interesting because it said that it's totally fine for AI companies to train on published materials. However, it was not cool that they used pirated books. So the payment is actually for paying these authors for the
Interesting.
piracy. In Europe, it's a little different because there's already laws on the book that say you have to pay the creators. And that's how Amlet and ISCC was born over there, not in the United States. In the United States, yeah, you can, as long as you pay for it. And by paying for it means like going to the strand and buying a copy and scanning it, which, doesn't compensate the author for it.
So you mentioned that there's a difference in law that's kind of made this software the right choice, I guess, in Europe versus something that maybe people haven't thought about in the United States yet.
Right. And some of the lawyers, I talked to one of the lawyers who was on that big Anthropic site, and she said, we're looking to Europe to solve our problems because the United States is not solving our
Mm.
problems. Yes, in Europe, there was a law in 2019 against digital scraping. that basically said that companies could not take copyrighted materials without permission and that they needed to compensate. However, when they started to try to enforce the law, or people started to try to like, okay, how do we do this? It was still an extremely manual process. Ask a coder to write a letter to a rights agency and wait a month and a half to see if they can get permissions and see what. No, they're not going to do that. They're just not.
That's
That's
a
how it
long time.
works.
So Amlet
Yeah.
then sits in the middle and allows all of those rights decisions to be pre-decided by the people who own it so that you can query it in real
Yeah.
time.
Exactly. And Amlet, as we're developing it, is a tool for people who work in the rights industry, right? So, literary agents, big publishers, rights agencies can use the technology. So, we're not a rights agency per se, although we'll probably be doing that for self published authors through StreetLib. But we are like, it's an infrastructure. So, it's, as I say, it's like a tech connector that will take the API from the from the developer in the apps and connect it to books and
Mm.
to content.
Now, let me be a little cynical for a second and say,
Of course.
let's say the investors don't care. Anthropic can pay $1 billion a year. They have money. That's fine. What would the practical solution be? Like, what's there another practical benefit to being able to access this content in a way that's fair and legal?
I think number one, like, I think I'm predicting that we're going to see less large language models and more small language models. Like, you and I, anybody, we can go develop our own AI tool. We can create a small model. And I use the example of maybe like a medical care model, for instance. You're going to want to build that on textbooks and peer reviewed journal content and not on the comments from WebMD. And if you don't know where your content is coming from, it's going to be harder to say this is high quality and it's going to hallucinate less if it is, very controlled and very well used. And I hope that like future models are being trained that way. And I think that the technology, as I understand, is evolving so that building these smaller language models is more and more
Mm.
viable.
So then what I'm hearing you say is because the big models have been limited to what they can take for free, they probably don't have access to peer-reviewed journals or other things that are high quality academic writing.
Right, and that stuff is really being locked down. I mean, that is absolutely been in response to this like scraping is that high value content is being put behind
Mm.
paywalls. Research reports and everything that may have been previously like, maybe not visible, but not locked down is disappearing from the web. Like the
Mm.
good stuff is, yeah. And there are already people negotiating. They have lawyers, they have rights people, they're doing it with handwriting and maybe some Stripe transactions between them. But it's definitely happening, and we're seeing that. And then on the flip side, and this is future, for authors, it's this ability
Yeah.
to sell the rights easily
But
and
having to hire your own rights
frictionlessly.
team and lawyers and go find a way to sell your own rights to giant companies like Anthropic. Mm.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you not just the rights that you need in order to have training happen. There are other kinds of AI rights for when you want to reference, when you want to use, I think. So could you explain more of that?
Exactly. And we've sort of defined 4 or 5 different rights, and it depends on the various use cases. So there's training, that's the one. And then you sort of more feature forward is can it be used in a generative AI, which is like, it could be, and whether or not to be allowed to be trained so that individual strands of the text are
Mm.
recognizable and can be created. And for that, we talk about the difference between input and output. So, like the training the models is all input. Whereas the generative AI rights is like, it might come out, you might be able to query this chatbot and say, give me Daniel's podcast style writing, and it can actually create something that
Mm.
resembles the original thing that went in there. So that's like generative AI. And then the other really big use right now is research. So whether or not we can actually research the contents of your books or not. So can it be used in a deep research application? And if so, and for both of these, the generative and the research, users or content providers should be paid on a token basis, like Spotify artists. So every time somebody pulls up your information or uses it, or it's brought up and surfaced in these queries, you should get,
Hmm.
micropayments and
Yeah,
ongoing.
ChatGPT recently has started refusing to generate song lyrics, and it explained to me that supposedly
Ah.
that violates copyright, and yet generating things that other people have written currently it will do.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So like one of the things that I work with authors who are self-publishing and they put song lyrics in the book, and this is like true and unrelated. I'm like, please take them out because you're going to be paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to reproduce that very small piece of text if you follow the proper channels
Mm.
of licensing those rights. And the music industry is definitely ahead of us. So I can imagine, one thing the book publishing industry just did is that earlier this year, last year, the Kindle app allowed you to like summarize the books and to let you have a conversation. And
Yeah.
the Authors Guild said, we did not give you
Huh.
permission to
Did
do
they
that.
win?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, and they have like really pulled back
Okay.
on that
Yeah.
functionality. And not that anyone thought that was all that valuable. I mean, I don't know. Do you really want to talk to your Kindle? I
Yeah.
mean, maybe
Yeah.
talk to other
Yeah. That's a
things.
good point. But I could see the need to license those rights. If you're gonna use it in a generative AI setting, then you should compensate the people who you're referencing, the people who you're emulating.
Yeah, and I want to make a note that it's totally fair. If you are one human being, not an AI, who bought a book, you can use it however you want for personal use. So if you took notes from that book or you clipped things and you wanted to chat with ChatGPT about what you learned, or he's totally fine. Just don't
Mm.
resell it. So
Hmm.
that's what's not allowed.
And how does that look different now in the States versus Europe? Because I guess for a little context, I've had people say Europe is locking things down so hard that it's difficult to innovate, and the States is giving the freedom to the people making the models. But it feels like they both have pros and cons.
I think they both have pros and cons, and I think you need to consider that this is
Mm.
a global thing. Like these tools are used worldwide and by global citizens and global corporations. So I think we're going to see a fair amount of, bouncing back and forth. Yeah, the US does, and that's, a lot of people were really upset that the Anthropic lawsuit just pointed out piracy and
Mm.
not the fact that, wait a minute, what are these people doing with our content? And for that model, the early models, and of course, we're talking about each model gets trained. So each version
Yep.
of a model, chat 4, 5, whatever, will contain for as long as that model is being used, all of that
Yep.
data. It could be 20 years.
Yep.
So it's stuck in there. But I think what you're saying, like this pushback and these creative industries really pushing hard against AI. And although I'm kind of an AI optimist and I'm working in AI, like there are a lot of authors and creators who think this is the worst thing that has ever happened to the industry and are very angry about all of this. And in the worlds of literature, they're resisting it strongly, like closing their eyes could make it go away. But I do think that they should continue to like say, if you use it, we need to understand how and we
Yeah.
need to be compensated because you just can't make money off of our
Yeah.
free labor.
And that reminds me of maybe the New York Times lawsuit, where it felt like you could,
Mm.
I think, even just ask ChatGPT write in this style, like really reference them.
Yeah.
Have you seen how that's impacting what people write? From my perspective, if we start pushing out human writing because we're relying on AI writing, we're going to stop having things even for AI to reference.
Exactly. Like AI gets really stupid when it trains on its own AI. I think, human writing, and I think we're definitely going to see this in 2026, that human writing is going to be valued even higher. I'm seeing a lot of people on their newsletters saying written by a human. There are publishing imprints that are like written by a human. I know literary agents who refuse to consider anyone's work if they say they used AI. So that, yeah, and there's discernment, right? You have to like people are going to be like, oh, I that's definitely AI, but maybe
Yeah.
it's not. I don't know. I've always used M dashes, darn it. So yeah, I think human is for now it's going to be valued, but I also think I wouldn't be surprised, and it's already happening, that certain genre writers, romance writers, horror writers, sci-fi writers are building and training their own AIs
Mm.
that write like them. And, if you work really hard on training an AI model, it can look like no one else's. It's going to be completely unique in all the world. So I think that writers who are leaning into it are going to get a lot more sophisticated. And I think saying, did you
Yeah.
use AI or not is not the question. I think it should be, is this original or
Mm.
derivative is more the question. And, like Amlet actually, like it has a new feature and it just was released or is being released as we speak that allows you, like, once you have registered, you can upload any other content you that appears on the web or that comes up and see how directly
Mm.
matchy it is to yours. So is this a 90% match or not? So like derivative works is gonna be a
I
thing,
like that question a lot.
I think.
Is it original or is it derivative? And I think from what you said, there are many authors who would view any use of AI as derivative, but how do you see it?
I like just like I say, I think it's evolving. And as I've been experimenting with it for better or for worse. And I do know that to get a good piece of writing or even a good piece of outlining or
Yeah.
help, it is not easy. Like you can't just say to ChatGPT with whatever brilliant prompt you have, write me a book that won't sound like something you've already
Mm.
read 100 times before. So you have to work on it,
Yeah.
even sentence by sentence. And I think it's a great assistant. It can help you. Can you tell me how many times I repeated this word? Or like things that writers like ask themselves in editing. And I do think it's an iterative and a back and forth process. And I do know a few writers who are doing absolutely brilliant things by very carefully training
Mm.
AIs to help them.
Mm. Well, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And one other topic that you'd mentioned before was, I guess the note is the future of publishing and small, scrappy imprints. Is that something
Mhm.
that's new with AI? Is that changing with AI? And
Always been small, scrappy imprints, but I think this is something that's evolving out of the self-publishing space and independent publishing. And what's going on is okay, so AI is interesting in other ways. AI is helping us run really effective Facebook ads. It's helping us figure out our market faster and, get do marketing techniques faster. So I think what AI is doing is actually bringing some of these big company skills and strategies down to a much smaller level so that a person with good taste and a sense of an audience can build out a publishing company that's very specific for a very specific reader that reaches that reader and is yet profitable. And I think that my personal feeling is like somebody who gets successful at self-publishing, who knows really like nails it and can like get their romantasy titles out there, that they almost have an obligation to publish others or to nurture other talent because not everyone who's a great writer
yeah.
is going to be a good marketer. But some people are figuring out that AI is like a brilliant business companion and can help them run a company in a way that you don't need the resources of a big company. And by focusing on a very specific audience, Midwestern romantasy maybe, you can build a company. And I do think that what's happening, it used to be that publishers wouldn't even look at a self-published work. Now the no-go is AI. But 5 years ago, the no-go, oh, you self-published and now you're bad. I think I see actually publishers are actually seeking well-published, self-published works, books that found an audience, books that need the leverage of a large publisher to reach bigger audiences, to go into print, to go global, to have the rights sold all over the world. That is emerging. So I wouldn't be surprised if this trend continues, that we're going to see self and small publishers first. That's where everyone's going to start. It's going to grow. And then when it gets successful,
Mm.
then it gets acquired.
Mm.
So it's different. And there's some really savvy publishers like Sourcebooks that are
So that
doing
sounds
this.
almost like the inverse of what happened with ebooks. Everybody, the industry
Yeah.
amalgamated, everybody had to publish themselves, but now AI is enabling somebody who wouldn't run a business to run a business to get that audience and then get the leverage to get into a bigger publisher.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sort of like devoting this year to helping like authors build businesses. I think that for me, that's like the very best use of AI, that and selling the rights. Like, how can we use AI to
Mm.
monetize, not AI to write?
Yeah,
It's
100%.
different. Although I think AI is awesome for writing complaint letters. Just saying.
That's right. If you don't have to put too much of your own personality into it, AI is a lot better.
Yeah, it tempers down the angry bits because I'm just so like I've gotten you get a refund or like he's upset about something. It actually helps. But if you want human emotion and you want to put it
I like that.
in,
Take it down to make it a little more polite.
do it
Yeah,
by hand.
that's funny.
Uh,
And what I think is really exciting about Amlet, what it enables people to do when the whole system works really smoothly. What do you see as ways that could work when people are able to say, I published my own catalog of a few books. Yeah, I can use it in these ways. They don't have to have their own lawyers. What's possible?
yeah, I think what's really possible is on both sides. It's like I think you might see some really creative developers and AI creators who are building worlds around stories, who are building better specialty apps, all these things where we have all these knowledge in books. And one thing that's always frustrated me about books is that although we have all these great to do and how to books, I think books are way too cheap for the amount of time and knowledge that goes into them. They have not kept up with inflation. They are so packed with rich goodness for the most part, like really great actionable insights. But there's been some studies that show that only about 2% of people can actually execute on
Wow.
what they read in a book. So if you read Atomic Habits, like how many people actually can grow atomic habits from
Yes.
reading Atomic Habits? Only a very small percentage. So I do think like this combination of AI and applications and books could create learning that is way more powerful, story worlds that are so much more immersive, things that can be extended and imagined more. We're already seeing in the Scandinavian countries, for instance, there's a textbook publisher that's creating AI companions to their textbooks, helping students learn, with a
Mm.
learning rubric, like on top of the textbook. I just think that it opens up for even more creativity. They often say there's no new stories, there's no new things. But we keep coming up with different combinations or creative
Mm.
expressions of that thing.
So that's on the what we can build on top of it. What else could
Yeah.
be possible?
Oh, but for creators too, like it's a new source of revenue. And not only is it directly like the rights to AI, it's the fact that AI is recommending the books and creating the algorithms and finding the authors. It's just if they can make sure that their work is discoverable yet protected, it makes it easy for, they're working with the way the internet is
Mm.
growing and building as
Hmm.
opposed to against
Because
it.
right now the way to protect it is to lock it down, which makes it hard to find.
And hide it away. And that's just, that's the opposite. To the word publish literally means to make public. And if you're not publishing it, if you hide it
Yeah,
and don't make it available.
that's exciting. I hope both of those things take off.
Yeah, it seems like we're on the road.
Is there anything that I should have asked you?
Perhaps talk about more about AI and writing and like but I think we did cover those areas pretty well.
Okay. Is
Yeah.
there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
Oh, the world. No, I'd like to talk about how AI is empowering people to know what's really going on behind the scenes. I think like this whole idea of the chatbots. And so, what I find like the best use of AI for authors, in my opinion, is to do some reverse engineering of their books and their book sales and things that were hard to get your fingers on, like who are the real competitive authors to you? What are the books that are most similar to yours? You can do a lot of really deep internet research using Gemini in particular, I use to find out about books that are similar to mine. And then as a book publisher, you want to find the readers who read those books. So again, you
Mm-hmm.
can find out, where are they on social, who are their audiences. It's a lot of industry intelligence that is available at our fingertips that 2 years ago you would have had to pay thousands of dollars for it and even then couldn't get
Wow.
very good information on. It's not going to give you exact sales numbers, but it is going to let you know who's out there and how they're out there and how they're reaching readers. Like, and I think what's cool about authors, and I think anyone who's a writer should keep in mind, is like it's not a
Mm.
competitive industry, really. If somebody listens to your podcast, they're going to listen to 20 others. If somebody buys one book on atomic habits, they're going to buy 20 books on habits. It will become habitual to buy books on habits. And people who read a lot of books. people who don't read books at all. So never mind them. But so maybe you'll get paid when they're using ChatGPT and not reading
Mm.
books to read your
Bring them
words.
in by that. Yeah.
Yeah. But so when you are an author and you're looking for who's going to buy my book, you just look at who's bought other books like yours. The industry, I was an acquiring editor for a long time, and we always had to demonstrate that there was already a given market need for this
Wow.
particular book. And that simply this author had a
Mm.
unique spin on it. Not that it was unique in all the
Man,
world by itself.
that's a temptation that I feel is easy to fall into, especially with all the copycats and how easy it is. Where unless you feel unique, how can you publish?
You got to be unique. Yeah. And that's sort of the art of publishing is finding the new voice, but finding the new voice that fits in the old paradigm,
Mm.
or at least the existing
And
one,
AI
you
makes
know?
that easier too. That's cool.
It does,
I really like
actually.
that.
My own personal use of AI has changed over the last year that I kind of went all in
Mm.
and went crazy and experimented with a lot and I wrote a whole romance novel with cowboys and it was terrible and it will never see the light of day except as an experiment. And experimented with my own fiction, and that came to a screeching halt. And I wasn't using it to actually write, but I was using it to research and to like as a very
Mm.
close brainstorming partner. Like I was like, oh, like this and this. And then I went to enter a writing contest, like just an essay, just a first chapter contest. And I was really happy. And I probably spent like many hours, many weeks on this one chapter and went to fill out the entry form. And at the very bottom, it basically said, on penalty of death, do not enter anything. It wasn't that bad, although I told my writers group that, and they said, yeah, it sounded like that. That's what it sounded like. It was just like, you will be banned forever for submitting something that had any kind of AI in it. And it's just, there's no way to be
Mm.
subtle about it, right? Even though, again, I want to just go back to this idea of discernment. Whereas, self-publishing was taboo no longer. And now AI is taboo, but no longer as these get better. And, but honestly, like I have some editor friends and they've said that they've had people approach them and say, oh, I read the first draft of my novel with AI. Will you please read it and give me editorial advice? And they're like, no, no, thank you. I will not read your AI drafted novel. They live in, and people are asking for that. They're asking for, I've seen it among my colleagues and peers who work with authors and publishers. It's just, no, we can't turn that into something. Start with the
Mm.
original thought. So I've gone from having AI help me outline and sort of figure out the next plot point to the point where now I write by hand and then I read it. I let AI transcribe it for me as I read it in. And then I help it have it clean up my spelling errors and get it typed in a lot faster. But I'm using it differently after, and also understanding that a human is really important this year.
Yeah.
And my audience, my colleagues aren't going to tolerate me using it in that way.
Cool. Oh, and how can people follow along with you and Amlet?
Yeah, sure. You can find me at paperbacksandpixels.com, which is where my author education company is. And then Amlet.ai if you want to register your book. So if you're a self-publishing author, the best way to register your book with Amlet is to join StreetLib. And you can find information about that on my website or on Amlet or just streetlib.com, where you can sign up for a lifetime membership and upload your books, and they will automatically be entered into the Amlet database.
Very cool. Thank you, Julie.
Sure,
Yeah,
thank
really
you. Thanks for
appreciated
chatting.
this. I think it's rare to see what's an industry like publishing that is so big and feels so old would think of AI.
Yeah, it's really behind.
I started this podcast because of an image that came to me in a dream. Back when cities had walls, everyone passed through the gate. Talk to enough people there and you'd understand the city. I wanted to stand at the gate and understand not just how AI was changing, but how AI was changing us. If you know someone building or leading with AI, or if this episode was useful, an introduction, a share, or a quick review on your podcast app all help keep these conversations going and help others find them. You can reach me on LinkedIn at Daniel Maneri or by email at daniel@maneri.house. That's Daniel at manary.haus. Thanks for listening.